Welcome to the Lifetime at Work podcast, episode 19. My name is Greg Martin, and I'm an entrepreneur based in Toronto, where I own and run a food business called Farmer Prepared Meals. But I didn't start here. In my spare time, I record this podcast where I like to explore other people and their careers. I talk to people from all backgrounds to tell the real stories about their jobs and why they do them. For you, it's a chance to meet different people, and if I'm doing my job right, who knows? Their stories may inspire your life or your future career in some way. And in this episode, I'm talking to a career coach who works with, as she describes it, creative types. And she has a bunch of lessons and a lot to say about finding the ideal career for you. So let's play the intro music and get going. If you're a fan of this podcast, go to lifetimeatwork.com. That's the best way to follow what's going on. You can also subscribe to this podcast on really any of your favorite platforms that play podcasts. This episode, like all the others, is brought to you by the Prepared Meals company that I currently own and run. It is called Farmer Prepared Meals. If you are in Ontario and you haven't tried our meals, you really need to. We deliver everywhere. You can order whatever you want. There's no commitment. There's no cooking. It's a lot easier than really most of the other meal services out there. Go to farmr.ca to check it out. And you can use the promo code IKNOWGREG, all one word, to get a discount. In this episode, I'm talking to a career coach, which I really like doing because instead of being incredibly specific with something, we can be a little bit more general and talk about careers, why we do them, some of the dynamics going on just in the world and socially. And it's just cool. I really like talking about that. I think it encompasses the podcast really well. And no matter who you are listening to this, I think it'll be relevant to you in some way or another. This week, I'm talking to E.B. Sanders. She's a career coach based in the San Francisco Bay Area. And she used to be a prof. That's what she wanted to be her whole life, or her whole kind of grown up. I have a real job. I know what I want to be part of her life. And eventually had to leave that career because she just wasn't making enough money and, wasn't in the right place for it. And it was hard to give it up because she really felt like, deep in her bones that that's what she was. And now has a new career doing this career coaching, which is a lot more fulfilling in many ways and just better for her. But we get into talking just about that, about how when you want to be one thing, it is hard to give it up and be something else and leave that and tell everyone and just really have the confidence, I think, to be able to do it. And so we talk about confidence in here, and we talk about a lot of the dynamics, even with profs and teaching and learning this stuff. And it's a cool conversation because we cover a lot of ground related to careers. And so whether you are someone who has ever thought about changing careers or just looking for the confidence or what else is out there, I think it's a helpful conversation for you for sure. It was a fun one for me too, like I said on the outset, because we talked just all over and all about careers and how to think about them. So I hope you enjoy my conversation with E.B. Sanders. Well, E.B., welcome to the Lifetime at Work podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I thought we could start probably by you just giving a brief introduction of yourself. So why don't we start there?
Awesome. My name is E.B. I currently help women and folks and marginalized people and their allies gain the confidence to really do absolutely any career that they want to, and ideally one that lines up with their values and priorities. And it's really about cutting through the BS to help you find your thing.
And so, how do you do that?
It's slightly different for, each client, obviously, but all of my work starts with really the foundation of who you are as a person, what it is you truly value in life, what your priorities truly are versus what you may have been taught you're meant to believe is important, what you're taught that you are supposed to do. So a lot of it really begins with trying to divorce your client, from their expectations of, societal pressures, familial pressures, what they've just always been on the track doing because that was someone's definition of success, and really have them step outside of that and take a moment to decide what they want, what they feel success is, and then find a way to work towards that.
Yeah, it is. There's kind of these, I guess when we get into any career, probably there is a culture and a way that people think about their peers and all the things that come with it. And I feel like we have these, even if we don't know about it, these
Mhm,
preconceived like notions of this is what it should be, or this is the type of
mhm,
person that I'm trying to be. And it's
mhm.
hard to let that go sometimes, right? I mean, and I think you have some of that in your story from back. It just, being able to say, hey, is this the right decision for me to do something else? And so it sounds like though you help with that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's like you said, it's yeah, a lot of times it's not something that people even realize. I do find very frequently that people who are first generation immigrants, those societal expectations are very clear. They have two options. You are going to be a doctor or you're going to be a lawyer.
Yeah.
But, outside of that, there are so many expectations from your community, from your family, from where you live. Like I live in Silicon Valley, there's very clear definitions of what quote unquote success is.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
is something we just sort of accept instead of stepping out of that and questioning it.
Yeah, no, I totally hear you. So, why don't you maybe talk a bit about how you got here then and becoming a coach and in this field, you started off as a prof. Where did
Mhm.
that come from? Why did you want to do that in the first place? And how did my next question coming to that is, and how did you realize that you needed to do something else?
Yeah, how I decided I wanted to be a prof, I that's just one of those things I sort of always knew. I'd always loved teaching. My first job ever when I was like 13 years old was teaching kids how to swim, and I loved the teaching aspect of it. And I always knew that that was something I wanted to do. I knew I wanted it to be at a higher level than just like elementary school or high school. I knew I wanted it to be at a university, and I wanted to be able to study cool stuff that I wanted to do, and I wanted to get other people excited about the school's cool stuff that I was excited about. And I loved my job, and I worked very hard to get it. I'm the first in my family to even go to college, so to then want to be very much a part of that system, I didn't have a model for that, so I had to work very, very, very hard. But it was something I just in my core knew I loved teaching, and that's what I wanted to do. So I did the grad school bit. I stuck around, basically I'm one of those students that just sort of showed up for school one day and then never left.
Yeah.
And I genuinely, genuinely adored my job. Like any job, though, even if it's your quote unquote dream job, there are parts of it that you obviously dislike. But for me, the reason I had to then leave that and make my way to this coaching practice is that, this is not uncommon, but we're just teachers aren't paid. They're
Yeah.
definitely not paid what they should be. And I live again in one of the most expensive cities on the planet. And I found myself as a very grown woman having to make the decision of, do I pay the electric bill or do I eat? And I decided to do neither of those things and pay the landlady. And also that the decision was sort of made for me. I
Yeah.
could either I really only had two choices. I could up and move away from my family. My entire family's here, and I could up and move away from my family and everything that I know and love, and move to another state where I did have offers for other teaching positions, or I would have to change careers. And I really didn't feel like it was a choice because, like many people, I've got parents that are getting older and nieces and nephews that are growing up, and I wanted to be here for them.
Yeah.
So it wasn't so much a choice, but it definitely came to a head at a certain point. And again, it wasn't a decision that I made. The
Yeah.
getting into the career was one, but yeah, that it just sort of came to an end.
And so what did you teach, or what did you, and maybe what was your field generally, and what did you really like teaching?
Oh, my field was humanities.
Yeah.
So I was the bucket of fun stuff. I basically got to teach creativity and, history of film and literature, and we could do comedy and food and study why humans, create murals and like just really anything you can think of that has to do with human creativity and problem solving.
Yeah.
It was just amazing. It was so much fun. And for a lot of my students, it was something they'd never been exposed to before. So that was always really fascinating to watch just light bulbs go off. And I genuinely loved that part. And I loved seeing students get so engrossed in the material that they decided to then major in it or to then become teachers themselves. That was something I very much loved.
Why do you think? Because I've sort of noticed this too. I've actually thought about it myself. Of that I like teaching a little bit. I have always liked that component of my job. When in the past, when I've had to train people or manage people, I've enjoyed that. Right? It's actually really fulfilling to show someone how to do something, to then see them do it and succeed and move up, and that's really fulfilling. And so I've thought, hey, that would be cool to maybe, but I was thinking the opposite way. Like as I was older, that would be sort of the retirement thing of when I get old. But I was looking at it, and yeah, the pay is very poor. Like it's really. And I started to look into just the industry generally a little bit, and to, you look at job postings, and just in kind of college, you tend to really need a lot of credentials, like for even something that doesn't qualify or need a PhD, you kind of need one to teach it or to be, and it's just kind of that's kind of how it seems like the industry works. Do you have a sense for why? Yeah.
I love that you said that's how the industry works. I would argue that's how the industry actually doesn't work. It's one of those, I mean, I guess it's not that strange. There's a finite number of actual universities, right? Unlike if you want to do something really interesting and high level at, some sort of corporate job, a new one of those could pop up every 15 minutes or tomorrow. But with university levels, there are only so many schools that are allowed to give you degrees by law, right? Yeah. So there are a finite number of these positions. They are intensely competitive. And, it's unfortunately a lot of it, an economics 101 professor would be very excited to tell you, it's, supply and demand, right? Yeah. So many people love this career so much that they don't have to pay them as they know that they should. There's no one is arguing that teachers should be paid more, but it's just, they say the money isn't there. Yet somehow the admins of these universities make quite a bit of money. Yeah. And the students are the ones who always are unfortunately punished for that. I saw my classes when I started were already overstuffed. And by the time I left my career, they were doubly stuffed. And you were expected to, then take a lot of it online to kind of ease that pressure, which is a very different learning experience, which everyone's experiencing now. Yeah. So I don't know why that's continued to allow to be a thing, but it's fairly universal in the Western world that as a professor, you are just not going to be paid what you're worth.
No, I even started looking at some of the positions from my degree and looking at, like, I have an undergrad in business, and so I was looking at some of the profs that I would have had, and at the time I really just thought it was a much better job than they had at the time, like in terms of pay. And I would have thought like they were professional people doing what is high level stuff. I mean, like you need to know a lot of information to be able to, and they would have industry experience and just see, and then you look at what they were paid, and it just didn't seem to compute to me. Certainly some of the like the large lecturing profs who did some of the really big courses, I think they were definitely paid much better. But the average sort of lecturer who also on the side had, being in business, a lot of them had a business on the side, and I understand why. It's not really a profession in and of itself that could sustain you very well. And it seemed to me then, hey, this is a bit of a funky model in some ways of how it works. But
it's an absolutely terrible model. And here in the States, we're bound to join unions to ideally keep a lot of this from happening. However, and I don't think people think about this, most of the work you do as a professor is actually unpaid, because you're only paid for the hours you're in the classroom.
Yeah.
But when do they expect you to do grading? When do they expect you to have office hours? When do they expect you to do the actual work other than just the lecturing? You're only paid for those hours, which is staggering to me. Yeah. And it's completely accepted.
Yeah, no, I guess if people accept it, then, and people are willing to do the job, then that's like what, like you said, supply and demand. Like, what are you going to do? Okay, so I guess in terms of then, because you obviously must have gotten a lot of fulfillment from, like you mentioned, teaching and seeing kids and being able to, or young students, and being able to see them succeed and learn things and have those wow moments. Is it similar now in teaching and coaching and the stuff that you do more one-on-one now?
Oh, absolutely. But it took me a while to realize
Yeah.
that. My I didn't leave my teaching job and then next day wake up and say, oh, I'm just going to be a career coach. It's the same thing. It was quite
Yeah.
a long, winding path that I really struggled with. But then I realized that it is actually so much of the same thing. Whether it's a 19-year-old student or a 45-year-old professional woman, it's helping people figure out who they want to be in the world.
Yeah.
And once that clicked for me, my light bulb moment happened. And then I was able to really work with my clients from that sort of teacher perspective and really teach in much of a different format. But that's what I'm doing is I'm teaching and I'm showing them how to do things. I don't just give people, career tests and then tell them, okay, it spits out that you should be, an aeronautics designer. Here you go. It's very much teaching them how to make decisions on their own and teaching them how to see the world the way they want to see it.
And um I guess the process then for you switching careers, what was hard for you to let go? Or
Oh,
yeah. But
it was so difficult for me to let go because being a professor, and I think for many people, their careers like this, it wasn't just a job that I did, it was very much my identity.
right.
I was a professor. It wasn't just I clocked in from 9 to 5. That was it. I could sort of take it or leave it. No, no, no. It was very much who I was. And once I couldn't really do that anymore, I sort of held on to it. Like I liken it to having gone through, a divorce where all of a sudden your entire support system, who you thought you were, your identity is just radically changed, but you're sort of maybe still calling your ex on the phone. I
Yeah.
would pick up a class here or there at different campuses just to kind of keep my toes in while I
I still do it. I
well,
still do it. You can't say I'm not a prof. Right.
exactly. And I just sort of had this idea. I'm like, oh, they'll come back to me, right?
Yeah.
And it was this idea that I wasn't ready to be something else. I didn't know what else to even be because I really, again, was so wrapped up in my job being my identity, which isn't super healthy, let's be honest.
Yeah.
But, it's also because it's one of those professions that has like a little bit of cachet. It has some respectability. It's considered, a noble job to be a teacher. And I think I really internalized, like, it was a nice shorthand to say like, oh, hey, I do something good, right? It's not just I'm another tech worker or I work for an oil company. It was really, I used that I'm a professor, that identity. So to lose that, it took me a long time to have to really force myself to figure out who I actually was. And it wasn't easy for me because I again didn't want to give it up. It wasn't a choice that I had made initially. So a lot of it for me was reactive. I was really reacting to the situation I found myself in, sort of fighting against it, sabotaging myself along the way. All the things I tell my clients not to do now, but I had to go through it. And
Yeah.
I came out on the other side a very happy, much more centered human being who can pay my bills. But it,
Right.
it took a lot of work to get there.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think I read your blog post where you sort of liken it to a relationship of dating
Mhm.
relationship, and I think it's interesting because it's one of those where your heart is telling you one thing, but all common sense is telling you something else, and you have these moments of going up and down, and you're not sure. When you
Mhm.
look back on it, it's so clear what the right decision was, but when you're in the moment, you have no idea, and it's sort of like, hey, if I just had this someone there to tell me, or if I just could go
Mhm.
back and tell myself that, it would make it so much easier. But you know what, I also find though that with me, so I sort of made a career switch. I anyways left
Mhm.
a trajectory to do something else. I didn't really feel though that I was necessarily like changing careers. I don't even really like that term, because
Mhm.
I could I could always go back.
Mhm.
And I'm using a lot of the skills that I gained and learned in the past career for what I do now. It's not like it's completely 180 something different. It is kind of a more of a career progression into something kind of different. Do you feel that way as well? That at least I mean, you could go back to being a prof if you wanted to, right? That's
Mhm,
the thing.
mhm.
If you know, you could get back into it in retirement if you wanted to. Right? It's not like that's completely gone. Or do you feel like it's really? But it sounds like you're rigid in it, in that you kind of you're over it, and you're just not gonna go back, and you love more what you're doing now.
That's such a tough one because I do still waffle with that. If like an amazing university would show up on my doorstep and say, "We want to hire you, and we're going to treat you well, and by the way, we'll actually pay you," I would struggle with that decision if that
Yeah.
actually happened. Um, yeah, it would still
Interesting
be
to
a
think,
struggle, but
huh? Yeah.
yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, it'd be because I did love the job so much, and it was so much who I am at my, at core. And again, I going through it to say like, oh, hey, but you're going to use those skills in a different way. I would have been like, okay, yeah, but it's not the same thing. And for me, I very much felt like it was a break, that whatever I did, since it wasn't going to be that, was going to be 180. And for my clients, very much I can see now, because objective, I can see how what they do, they're not 180 pivots, right? They're sort of veers and curves and roundabouts. And like you said, most of it is using the same skills because you're still the same person. You're
Yeah.
just using them in a different way. And the language around them might be different. But at the time, in the moment when I was feeling frustrated and lost and confused and broke,
Yeah.
you could not have told me that it was going to feel the same, that I'd be using the same skills and having the same satisfaction. I would never have believed
Right. I wanted to liken sort of some of this to the hospitality industry,
you.
which
Hmm.
I'm involved in now, and are
Hmm.
definitely seeing a lot of people who, given COVID, are now without a job, or their industry has been completely made incredibly challenging, or without job, and
Hmm.
now maybe thinking about uh, something very similar to what you were going through, of, hey, there isn't money in this, it's going to be challenging, etc. Someone in that situation debating, like, hey, do I wait it out, do I, and maybe the job will, a job, or my perfect job will come back, versus, hey, getting into something new. I mean, how do you go about trying to figure out if I should stay, if I should go, what I should do in that context? And I know it's just very general, but what
Yeah.
what is some generic advice you might have for someone in that type of situation?
Oh, this is interesting because since I live in San Francisco, I'd say, a solid 65% of my close circle is in the hospitality industry. It's just one of our
Yeah.
biggest fields, right? So this is a conversation I have a lot. So
Yeah.
I have some non-hypothetical advice for sure. And it is different for each person and what stage of life that they're in, right? But for someone who is a career bartender, career server, who is a restaurateur, who is a wine sales rep, right? Their needs, their wants, their goals are different. And what they have to do, and especially again, if this choice has been taken away from them, which unfortunately has for so many, is to do their best to look forward, knowing that we don't know how long things are going to be the way they're going to be right now, but they will change. We know things will never go back exactly to the way they were, especially in the restaurant industry. But for lots of good reasons and good ways, especially here in the US, we're looking at now how servers are paid, how bartenders are paid, et cetera. But to do the best that they can to look past this immediate crisis and look towards their long-term future goals. And I mean long-term. We're talking like,
Yeah.
when they get to the age where they might decide to, their retirement job is being a professor. Like how long are they looking at? I want them to look for their long-term goals in terms of financial security, in terms of general overall lifestyle, life happiness. Do they want to be living in a beach shack in Mexico, or do they want to have a high-rise apartment in New York? There's going to be two very different plans moving forward. But if you can start from where you want to end up and then reverse engineer what you would need to do to get there, you'll realize what your options are much sooner than if you sort of just go heads down and try to barrel through the problem right now. It can become an actual plan with list items that you can tick off one by one, and really start working on it. I have a lot of friends who have picked up very tangible side hustles. A lot of them have moved into food making businesses out of their homes. A lot of them have moved into completely different fields.
Yeah.
A lot of them have gone back to school, but it's very much what your long-term goals are. And unfortunately, it's not a quick fix. There isn't a thing I can say, okay, well, if you change your mind on this tomorrow and you do this, you'll have all the money you need and you'll be able to, save your hospitality career. It'll all be fine. We, I would love to be able to hand someone that, but since we don't know what the outcomes are going to be, even if they make plans to return to the industry, what that means for them may be very different than the ideas they have of it. But once you know what your long-term path is, and this is an analogy I use a lot with my clients, it's sort of like that game we had in the 80s, the computer game, Oregon Trail, is you have to figure out where you want to get across the river before you worry about how you're going to get across the river.
Right.
And so it's about, finding that long-term need, that long-term desire, that long-term want, and then building your step-by-step plan to get there. And it may mean a complete shift.
Well, and it may be just that push that you need or that time that you need to say, hey, you know what, I've always wanted to do this, so maybe now is the time because I've lost my job or that my work is now very uncertain or whatever the situation might be. But there also may be some reflection, I guess, going upon it, saying, hey, here's what I wanted out of this industry. I'm not getting it for these reasons, and I'm worried now that I will ever get it. So maybe now is the time to start looking at other options, right? And what I also could be qualified for. I see that sort of happening in the Bay Area. Like I know that the stereotype in, say, LA is that there's all these people in the hospitality sector, but they are all aspiring comedians and actors and everything. Is that common in the Bay Area as well, where you're sort of doing that, and just people that maybe where you're going into the hospitality industry to in the interim while you're working on something else, that some passion project that you might have, or you're aspiring to do something else? Do you see that as a common thing?
Much, much, much less so than LA.
Okay.
People in San Francisco are very much career hospitality people. It is what they've chosen to do. They're excellent at it. It is their long-term career plan. But of course, there's also, just due to the transient nature of the job itself, there's always people who just sort of fell into it, or it worked with their school schedule, and now 5 years after they've graduated, they realize they're still doing it. Yeah. So there's always going to be that, but very much here it's a career that you've chosen, and it's a respected one in our city, where like LA and New York, not so much. It's very much like, oh, you're doing this between auditions, where whereas here it's, oh, you've invented a whole new cocktail line and you're opening a new bar and you've brought the most amazing talent in the city. Yeah, it's a very different thing here.
I guess, yeah. And you're talking about more culturally, which I think is interesting, something that you can kind of be proud of, which I think is important. And to your point from before, it is something that I think with all that's going on, some things sort of need to change, or some of the practices and the way we sort of treat some of the people in the hospitality sector probably need to change. And hopefully it can, and be an overhaul, but who knows? It's going to be harder before we can kind of get there. So how do you sort of tie generally career with goals in life? Are those things, do you think, always combined? Or like you mentioned, if you have a financial goal, I want to own this, or I want to be here, or I want to retire there, it may be different than something you want to achieve out of your career or get. And one example could be, well, I want to teach people a lot of things, right? And that's what and that's where I'm gonna get my fulfillment, versus I want to I want to retire with X amount of dollars. And how do you sort of help people weigh the money component with the sort of accomplishment fulfillment component of a career choice?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot there, but I think what you said last is really the most important, is this idea of how do you reconcile doing something you really desire, something you get fulfillment from, or the money, where I think culturally we have this idea that you can love what you do or make money.
Yeah.
I'm a big believer it's and. I absolutely believe it's and, because But we all know this. You can also absolutely hate your job and make money at it. I don't know why we can't just flip that, right? So, I mean, the goals have to be there. You have to know why you're doing anything, right? You have to know why you're eating the food that you're eating, much less why you're doing what you're doing for 9 hours a day. And I really work with people to get them to understand that what they value in life, if their top core values are like family or religion or sustainability, they are actually different than their priorities. Because, like you said, if it's your priority is to retire with X amount of dollars, you're going to have to make sure that no matter what you're doing, let's say if you're, like again, really into environmental causes and sustainability, but you want to retire in 2 years with $6 million, and you've been offered a job by a fracking company. Is that going to help you with your financial goal? Yes. Is it going to support your values? Absolutely not. So your values and priorities have to support your career, and your career has to also support them. It has to all be big triangular shape where they're all holding each other up. Because even if you're meeting those goals that you set, whether it is monetary goal, or it is a teaching goal, or it is a just title goal, if you're meeting those things but they're not honoring your values, you will never be happy. You will never truly enjoy what you do. You will never be fulfilled, because you will have, old terminology, you'll have sold out, and you won't feel like a whole person. You won't put your whole person into it because it's going against what you truly believe to be important.
And I also think too, maybe we miss some of that in, I don't know, the teen years or something, when we're impressionable and we're thinking maybe, or beginning to think about what we want to do, and that part maybe doesn't quite get through, where it's, and maybe as parents, I have two kids, maybe we don't do a great job all the time of instilling this, hey, you should be following your passion here or there. It's more of a, you better make sure that you make money and that you get off my payroll, and there's sort of that mentality. And maybe we overdo it maybe sometimes with our kids. I'm wondering if that, and it's not really a part of, I don't think, education really, right? Like this concept of, how do you find a career? How do you find yourself? How do you even interact with people? I'm going to throw that in there as well.
Yeah.
We don't really talk a lot about that or teach that. It's not one of the courses that we take, but you reach a certain point where you might find, hey, I'm in my 20s. I don't know these things.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think, unfortunately, that's a vestige of a hangover from, our parents and our parents' parents sort of work culture, in that most of them didn't have the option to choose to do something they liked. It just wasn't an option. For some, sure, they did. But for the bulk of people, it was, you did the job that was available to you in your vicinity in order to support your family.
Yeah.
And then you stayed there for, 35 years. You got your gold watch, then you got to go fishing. So like that's the education that we've received, because that's what they were modeled on. Where there've always been the outliers. There's always been the creative people. There's always been the crazy inventors, right? But they were looked at as outliers. And where now people are understanding that corporations are not going to care for them in the way that they, in theory, did earlier. It's sort of liberated people to do things that they actually enjoy, and to not be ashamed to say, well, I don't like that job, so I'll go do a new one. And the fact of the matter is that new jobs are being created so much more rapidly in a way that they never have been in history. You can do jobs today that did not exist 2 years ago, right? And that's so very new. And so hopefully those coming up, those in their, preteens, teens, early 20s, are seeing that they actually have more options, that they can choose something that they want to do, but that it is a choice. Unfortunately, and I see over and over and over, especially people come to me, is that they understood that they could do whatever they want. They were told, oh, do something you like, follow your passion, follow your bliss. But they didn't really set out to have a plan for that. And they sort of fell into something and then realized, 15 years later, they're still there and they're not happy. But it paid the bills. It was fine. They didn't hate it. They weren't miserable. They figured they were doing fine. Whereas if you actually go at it with intention and choose a thing that makes you happy, that supports the values you find important, it's a whole different game.
Yeah, it's actually quite revolutionary, actually, in the breadth of jobs that I think that are out there and all the things that you can do now, and really that have been created in the last 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
To one of your points, I mean, I follow a lot of these. I listen to podcasts and stuff about people who have started their own business, who have said, hey, I want to spend more time with my family, and I'm going to go online and create this business doing this because I know how to do it. And just there are all these podcasts, and week after week there's another person on there saying, hey, here's this quirky thing that I'm doing that I love, but like I found a niche and it's working out well and all that sort of stuff. And it's a kind of incredible how that can work for people, but also how so many people don't know about it, that it actually is, or that you
Mm-hmm.
can find a career in it, that hey, because of the internet really and social media and all that, you can actually connect with people all across
Mm-hmm.
the world. So though maybe in your small town there's no one who likes, I don't know, pigeon raising,
Right?
and that you can actually create a great niche and collect pigeons and make a whole YouTube channel and Instagram on that. But not only that, but sell your services, tips, write books. Like it kind of is endless
Yeah.
in terms of what you can do. And because you can interact with the whole world, you actually have a chance to actually make it into a living, which would be the craziest thing
Yeah.
30 years
And
ago, but it exists now.
it's so amazing. You're right. But entrepreneurship is not for everyone. Let's be clear. There's
No, yeah. You could work for a pigeon farmer though, but
you can
yes,
totally work for a farmer.
yeah.
But you're right. It doesn't matter what your niche is. There is someone else out there that wants that from you. There is absolutely an audience for everything. And we do now have the capability to do it, whether your business, your entrepreneurship becomes, quote unquote, online business, or you simply use, the internet for communication and contact. One of my favorite stories in the past few years is this girl who realized that there was a need for professional bridesmaids. Like she was going to all of these weddings and realizing that the real bridesmaid was either too drunk or had been put into hysterics by the mother-in-law, and the bride needed someone to actually be there and help and create the experience of just making the day go through. And she just put up a simple website and now works was before the pandemic, was working, a couple weddings a month and teaching other people how to do it and making a very good living from wearing, ugly bridesmaid dresses and making sure she had band-aids and could calm people down in the bathroom. That was not a thing that could have ever happened, prior. And I love that, someone can really decide what they want to do. They want to make someone's best day even better. And all they need to do is spend, an hour putting together a website and gathering together a couple dresses, and they can start their own business. That is fascinating to me. And I love that people take that leap.
Yeah. And I mean, most people listening to this is going to say those ideas are crazy. And anyone who tries to go and do them is crazy, but it's getting less and less. Like, I feel like if we just kind of keep going here, we see more and more people doing these things because they just become, I think, less crazy, and almost create confidence potentially in people that, hey, I can go and do something. And it's not like you have to quit your job and go and do this bridesmaids thing 100%. You can do it on the side as a fun thing. And if you get to the point where you think, hey, you can make a go at it, then you leave. You can do it without risk, and it can just become an interesting thing, on the side. And I mean, the Bay Area, it's all about side hustles. I think that's one thing I know about everyone there. They seem to, everyone you meet, to like, what's your side hustle? It's kind of about my intro. And I meet someone new, is what do you do this, but what do you do on the side? It's very common, but it's being allowed now. It's just, or enabled, I should say, probably is a better word for it. One of the things in your course is about, and you teach a course, and it's related to confidence. Why did you throw the word kind of confidence in there? What does that have to do with career and career changing and finding what you're doing?
Yeah, it's one of those things that took me a while for my own light bulb to go off. But in my one-on-one client work, we would do all of this work and get them to a point where they were so excited about a new opportunity that they decided to pursue. And inevitably, every single client would say, yeah, but, comma, why would they ever hire me? I heard that sentence in every variation you could possibly say it in. And I'm sitting there on the other side, and I was a recruiter in between being a college professor and career coach. I went into recruiting and staffing. And so I, was looking at this from the other side, being like, well, but you've got all the skills and you've got the fascination and you've got the interest and you've got the energy. As a recruiter, I would absolutely put you in the running for this, but they can't see that. They just absolutely lack the confidence and belief that someone will allow them to do the thing they've decided they want to do. And they're scared, understandably, because doing new stuff is always scary, right?
Yeah.
So I realized that it really was a facet that I had to focus on to get them to understand that they could do these things, but they had to believe that they could. Because, if you're going into an interview and you don't believe you can do the thing, that's going to come across. You then will not get the job. It's very much a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? But if you go at anything believing you can, your, percentage of success rate is going to be exponentially higher. Like, no one goes to, run a marathon thinking, oh, this is a thing that I can't do. Right?
Yeah. It doesn't.
You have.
Then you won't. If you do, then you won't. That's pretty simple, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So it's very much a process of getting them to really understand their value, getting them to understand their skill sets, their abilities, how they perform best, how they work best, all of those things, to really see it laid out in front of them so they see themselves objectively as someone working in the world. So it's seemingly blindingly obvious, but it's something that for most of my clients, when, I start working with them at the beginning, if I said, oh, is this a confidence issue? No one would have ever said yes. They would have just been like, no, I just don't know what else I want to do.
Yeah. But over time, it kind of comes out, hey, this is actually, there's a block here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Do you think that the confidence as it relates to career and job, does that relate to just overall personal confidence? Like, are those the same thing, or can you be the most confident person in a party or in any sort of social situation, but then think that you can't get this job or that job, or aren't worthy of this career progression?
I think that's just something that all humans do, right? There's so many ways we do everything that you can say, yeah, I know I could rock that job, but yeah, you throw me into a party, you're going to find me huddled in the corner with the cat, right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
But how I approach it is if you understand truly who you are at your core, and again, what your values are, what your goals are, what, decisions you make in the past and how they've formed who you are now, and you make new decisions based on all of that information, then you can just be solid in those decisions, knowing why you made them and that you didn't just sort of stumble blindly into something because it sounded kind of cool, right? You made intentional decisions, and that bolsters your confidence in the career world, because you know that you know what you're doing and you've made these choices intentionally and you're moving forward with a plan. Whereas for some things, like, again, going to a party, that's not a thing you're going to maybe set up an agenda for yourself for and a plan. So your confidence can waver, but I do find no matter what the issue is, if it is, maybe it's a big family dinner that terrifies you, or again, a new job, if you go into these situations understanding who you are, you're always going to be able to navigate them better.
Yeah. That's good advice. Yeah. No, I totally see where you're coming from and agree. And you could see them as separate, but I think you could also see them as similar. It's just your perspective and how you're thinking about it, probably. Mm-hmm. Where you're coming from and what you're trying to achieve, whether it's a job interview or a dating interview or whatever it is, you can kind of come from a place of, hey, yeah, I got this. Here's who I am. Here's what I'm trying to do. And it's not crazy. And I think that as a career thing, though, is super important, because you may start at a position where it is kind of crazy, where what you want out of life or what you want to do, and given where your position Yeah, it's like maybe even yourself, right?
Mhm.
None of your family went to college. Okay, well, how are you going to become a prof? That's crazy. Like it does seem like a challenging thing, but you have to first have the confidence to say, no, no, like this is possible. I can do it, and then that's the only way that you're gonna take the steps that it takes to get there. Um,
Yeah.
so there's sort of a stigma, I think, about career changes and it being something, and even being too old, or I'm too far along, or I can't go and change. What would you sort of say to that? Is that you run into that often?
I do.
Yeah,
I run into it almost every day.
yeah,
I have the conversation with some people of, I don't like what I'm doing. I'm miserable, but I don't know what else to do. And also, I'm too old to do anything else, and I've only ever done this thing. So, what am I doing?
yeah,
Um, I I do think you're right. There is a little bit of a stigma, but I honestly don't think that that's from the outside. I think that's very much an internal thing. People feel that others will view them as having failed in a career if they change them, or see them as maybe wishy-washy if they have more than one career. But in my experience, when you're out in the world and you meet someone who's like, oh, this actually happened to me. I met someone who was a chauffeur, but he'd actually owned a French bakery for many years.
yeah.
But then he decided to start this chauffeur service because he missed people and he liked being up at 4 in the morning. So it made sense for him to buy some very nice cars and drive to the airport at 4 in the morning. Um, and things like that that are seemingly so wild. And I actually asked about it because I am that crazy person that talks to everyone who drives some places. Um,
Yeah,
I asked him about it, and he said that people were sad that he closed his bakery, but everyone also thought it was so cool that at his age he started something completely new. And that's what I find to be more the unifying factor when I talk to people who have gone through the change and asked them when they get to the other side, what did people think? Do you care what they think? 9 times out of 10, they say once they decide to make the change, they stopped caring what anybody thought. But then when they told people that they were making a big change and did the change, people were overwhelmingly positive, thinking it's just so great to see someone take charge of what they want to do and go after a thing that they want to do. And I think there's a little bit of jealousy there, which maybe is where some of the stigma comes from.
yeah. I think now, I think if you can do it and have, to go back to our prior points, some confidence and say, yeah, I'm not doing it because I didn't cut it. I'm doing it because I want. Sure, I could have stayed a baker and that would have been fine. Like I could have, but I wanted to try something else, and here's where I am, and I'm confident, and I want to do it. For some reason, that seems you now flipped the conversation to, hey, this is that's an enviable position. It's great that he had the confidence and he could do that, versus
Mm-hmm.
someone who was unhappy but say stayed the same thing forever. Anyways, I kind of relate to that a little bit, where you say, hey, like why not try it and just
Mm-hmm.
have the confidence to be able to do it. And if you really know how to bake, you can always go back and do it, and realize that you love it, but maybe you're not. And if you don't take
Mm-hmm.
chances, then who knows what you're missing.
Absolutely.
it, Speaking of stigmas, is there a stigma about hiring a coach to teach you this sort of stuff?
That's really funny that you asked that because there was such a stigma for me around the whole. And maybe this is because I'm from California, and we very much have a stereotype of the hippy dippy LA life coach,
Yeah.
which is very much not me.
It,
And
it
so,
it might be the name. It might maybe needs a
right?
rebranding, right? It's sort of like, well, if you can't do life, you need a life coach, right? Like it's just this aggressive thing, but it's not. It's
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. And it's so when I was going through the work and really trying to figure out who I wanted to be and what I wanted to do, it kind of kept coming up like, oh, you should be a coach. And I was like, there's no way. I will never do that job. That title is stupid. It's not happening. And I rallied against it for quite some time until it really just kind of kept knocking me on the head. Like, don't be dumb. You love doing this. Just do it.
yeah,
Title be damned. And I'm very much not a life coach. I'm very much a career coach. That is the only thing that I have an expertise in. And so I don't veer into the life and relationship coach stuff. But there is a stigma to the life coach thing. I find that for career coaching, it's much less so because people are used to executive coaches
Right.
Especially maybe, in any major metropolitan city, right? It's a thing. If you're a high powered executive, at some point someone has hired you an executive coach to coach you through management, to coach you through change management, all sorts of things. And it's now just starting to trickle down to the more layperson per se. And I find that it's not so much a stigma for career coaching, executive coaching for non-executives, but that it's just not as widely known. It's sort of this idea of, oh, well, that is just a thing for executives, or they might not even know that executives get that kind of coaching. So I wouldn't say it's a stigma so much as just it's just not widely known and
Right.
utilized.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So do you find it hard to get people to like to make the sale once you're sort of in the conversation with people or they realize it, or it's just hard to explain for the people to find you because they may, if you don't know that you need a career
Mm-hmm.
coach, then how do you find one and how do you work with one in the first
Mm-hmm.
place?
Yeah, so for me, it was sort of a very natural progression because I was doing, recruiting and staffing, learning and development, career development at my last corporate job. And the reason I actually left that to start my practice was whatever advice I could give still had to toe the company line because they were paying my salary. And if what was truly best for one of my team members would be to move to a different company, I could not tell them that. If it was to, change their career, I could not tell them that. So when I left that to start my practice, I had this huge built-in network of people I was already working with who were very much connected in the industry in my hometown, who were very much connected to all the other major industry hubs. So for me, it was a very natural thing to just utilize that. And it was not very much of a struggle at the beginning. Um, and not that it's a struggle now, but it's different now that I've widened my scope out because I really just started working with clients in the advertising industry, which is where I was after I was a professor. And I pretty quickly realized like if I didn't want to be part of that industry anymore, I couldn't only work with clients from that industry because it was very much like still just being an employee in that industry. So I
Yeah.
moved wider, and it was very much about you know just being very much myself online in interactions with clients, when meeting people, out and about in the world, just very much educating them on exactly what it is that a career coach can do for them. And also letting them know that, I'm not right for everyone. Just like anything, not every therapist is right for everybody. Not every toothpaste is right for everybody, right?
Yeah.
You want to find the person to work with who is very much the right one for you. And because I am a bit more gregarious and a bit more loud and about and out, people find me who respond to that, who want that type of energy. And it is genuinely just about showing up. So when I do get sales calls, which I take a couple of weeks, it's by the time they've decided that they want to talk to me, they've really already made the decision that they want to hire me, that they want to do the work. It's that they've finally hit that wall for themselves.
Yeah.
And truly, when I'm talking to someone, it is just like, are we truly a good chemistry match? How does this exactly work?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah, I have received a few kind of strange, executive kind of coaching inquiries and that sort of thing, but it's rare. I think, people understand now a little bit more what career coaching is, but yeah, I do find that I have to educate quite a bit.
Yeah, and maybe it's something new. I don't, or I guess new in its popularity potentially, in just that I don't think that it's overly common myself, or just I'm like less aware of it. There's sort of this guidance counselor type person in high school, and then in
Hmm.
university there's sort of a career center, but it's not, it doesn't really follow the same trajectory. It's really put a lot on you. I think you as the
Hmm.
student, or you as the career seeker, it's on you
Hmm.
to know what you want, and then they'll help you
Hmm.
get it kind of thing. It's not really the, hey, let's talk about you and what you want and get into into I think you and your passions and what drives you and what you want and your goals and all that sort of stuff, which I think is I mean, in some ways, yeah, sure, it sounds easy to do by yourself, but I find like it can not always. You work with creative types, sort of thing, is how you put
Mhm.
it. What does that encompass in terms of who you typically would work with and go after?
Yeah, it's a creative type is someone who, to me, who doesn't just think in black and white and in linear fashion. So creative type can be anyone from a CPA, a rocket scientist, to an artist. And I've worked with people across the spectrum of every single type of field you can imagine. Everything from literally like the biosciences, like a research scientist, to a fine artist. And it comes down to just how do they think? Do they think in, circular motions? Are they okay with a bit of ambiguity? Are they excited about exploration? I don't work well with people who say, okay, I just want you to give me a test and I want it to go into a spreadsheet and I want it to spit out an answer and I want that answer on one piece of paper. I like First of all, I just don't think you can actually truly find out answers well that way, especially when they're about the human being. But my work is a little bit messier. There's a step by step process, but a lot of it is exploration and fun and play and getting into who you are as a person. And that's very rarely linear or black and white.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, no, I didn't know if it was a very specific like arts focus or whatever, but it sounds like it's broad as long as you're willing to, I think, be open. I like the term creative types. I kind of like that. Everyone sort of thinks like, hey, it's an aspirational thing. You're like, I want to be creative, or like I can do it, and it's not that crazy. But yeah, you might think that certain people in some careers might not think they apply.
Mhm.
Early in the conversation, you mentioned in terms of helping someone find what they want, and you have to think
Mhm.
about where do you want to be in the future and then work backwards. For you, when you go to the end of what you
Mhm.
want to achieve and then sort of work backwards, what is that thing, that goal, that sort of ending point where you want to get to?
Oh, mine is going to be so stereotypical California girl. I basically want my mother's life. My mother worked corporate for a very long time, retired, bought herself a little shack on the beach, literally a block from the beach in Santa Cruz, and got herself a scruffy little dog from the pound. And she just walks the beach in the mornings and hangs out and like walks to go to the cafe to have lunch with friends in the afternoon. Like I want my mom's life, which it's not an expensive life. It's not, I don't have this, I want to retire with, $60 million. I want to be happy and by the ocean. It's very simple for me. It's my definition of success, which it's not that it's new for me, but it's new that I've been able to accept and explain what I want very succinctly.
Yeah.
It's definitely not the Silicon Valley definition of I have a Tesla and a large house, on the peninsula, and I have a condo in Hawaii, and the kids go to private school. No,
Yeah.
it's yeah, I want just this kind of simple old lady by the beach life, and I'm here for it now. Especially as I'm getting actually older, I'm very excited about it. I'm
Right.
starting to buy caftans all over the place.
All of a sudden, you'll realize one day you're like, God damn it, I'm that old lady. I knew I wanted it, but I didn't want it now. Um, but I'll push you a little bit on that. Like, do you think, how does this career that you're doing now sort of get you there versus another one, or how does
Mhm,
that image, hey, I want to be
mhm,
here? How does that
mhm.
then? How do you then back up and say, okay, well, so I need to be a career coach and I need to
Mhm.
work with these people and et cetera.
Yeah, I mean, and here's the thing. Um, I've realized, looking back, having had now three major careers and having worked since I was 13 years old, I know now, and it's strange for me to say, but I know that what I'm doing now, is going to look very different if it still exists in 5 years, 10 years. Knowing me, knowing that my interests change, my kind of inspiration changes, what I really want to put all of my energy into changes. I might own some other business that's completely different in that time. I don't think that I have to be a career coach to get to that end goal. Um, and my guess is I probably won't be.
Yeah.
It serves me right now because I genuinely do love what I do. I love being able to help people one on one and really dig in. Um, and I just felt really constrained by the corporate structure. I don't think I could ever. go back to corporate, but that is another avenue. If I did decide, well, hey, I can buy a beach shack if I just have X number of dollars, I could absolutely go back into corporate and be like, that is my goal. I'm going to make that monetary goal happen in this amount of years. But for me, I am really lucky in that I truly do love what I do, but I'm very pragmatic that I can't see this being my all consuming burning passion to the point where I want to be an entrepreneur doing it until I retire. I think that's a lot of pressure to put on a business,
Yeah.
and and I love helping people figure out what they want to do. But my guess is at some point I'm going to wake up and be like, you know what, I'm ready for something next. What's my next thing? So I'm enjoying this while I'm doing it, and like I just watching my clients blossom and grow. I know I'm really good at what I do, but I could also want to do something else that I'm really good at and that I enjoy. And being a multifaceted person, as most of us are, that I'm excited by that prospect.
Yeah.
I always hear that, that the statistic about how many entrepreneurs and how many businesses fail within 5 years. It's like 87% or something crazy, but I don't look at them as, a lot of them failing. I think a lot of people, especially if you're going to go into entrepreneurship, you're up for doing new things. And I think a lot of those people are sort of look at it like I do, like they're probably going to want to do something else in a little bit.
Yeah.
So,
You're kind of just that type. It may just be part of who you are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like that answer. If someone wants to learn more about you, sort of see what you're about, follow you generally, what is the best way?
They can find me really easy. It's ebsanders.com. Everything is there. I've got a lot of free resources if people are struggling, trying to figure out what it is that they truly want to do. Please go grab anything that you feel might be helpful to you. And all of my social media links are on there. I'm very easy to find. So please do come check it out. ebsanders.com.
Great. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed having you on the podcast. It's good I talk to a lot of people about very specific careers sometimes, but it's nice to take a step back, as I mentioned at the beginning, take a step back and just talk more generally because, it's sometimes that just applies to everyone. And it's anyways, a topic that I can never get enough of is the hell are we doing? Why are we doing it? And what can we do to make us happy? So I appreciate you chatting with me about it.
I appreciate you having me. It was great.
Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. I hope you got a lot out of that and heard EB's story, which I think is really cool. We definitely got into the prof angle and the teaching aspect, which I'm just a lot of curious about and have been intrigued by, but then got into, okay, well, if that's not going to work, what does work and how do you find that with your career? So I hope that was helpful for you. For sure. If there's a guest that you think would be great, or you yourself think you would like to be a guest on the podcast, just shoot me a message. You can go to lifetimeatwork.com and get in contact with me very easily there. I've got a bunch of new cool episodes that I am working on in the near future, so stay tuned. And until then, don't worry, be happy. Thanks for listening.